Good evening. The presidential address on Sunday offered so little to anxious Ugandans waiting on government effort on the rising prices. The runaway fuel and commodity prices have made Ugandans dig deeper into their pockets to make ends meet, and yet with the new budget just weeks away, it now falls to legislators to use their appropriation power to tame the inflation. Tonight on The Spot is Julius Mukunda, the head of the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, and the Honorable Ssemuju Nganda, the Kira Municipality legislator. Mr. Mukunda and Honorable Ssemuju, gentlemen, a warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much, gentlemen, for having honored our invitation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me begin with you, Mr. Julius Mukunda, because Budget Advocacy Group, you understand the numbers, you understand the economy, you understand the budget. You have been doing this for a long time. But even before we dig deep into the budget issues, Mr. Mukunda, things are no longer adding up in Uganda when it comes to issues of our economy. What's going on?
I mean, what's going on is where you put your priorities. And I think Kamara, we've been talking about it for quite some time, is that if your added advantage to do something is in agriculture and you're not finding it appropriately, then definitely something will let go. And I think for me is the way we have prioritized is one of the biggest issues that we need to
I have
resolve.
Listened to you in the corridors of power, in conferences, in symposiums, in debates, in advocacy, budget debates, and you're always talking about priorities and singling out an issue of agriculture. Mr. Mukunda, do people running our affairs of government, the affairs of government of Uganda, do they don't care or they just don't get it?
Where I have reached now, I think, is that there are so many other competing priorities that people feel that if they do those ones,
their priority. But it's them and us.
Yeah, I think it is just them and us, because I believe that if you have if the biggest part of your operation is engaged in that particular sector and you want to transform it, you start from there. I have always said that yes, we want to build cars. It is okay. But we will never beat the Japanese, simply because for the last the last centuries, Japan has specialized in automobile. But there is one thing we can beat Japanese on, and that is the growing of beans and peas and the cassava in this country.
Organic food.
We can, and we can beat them. So let us get back to the drawing board and say, where do we have the added advantage? And we do that, and we do it rightly.
So wait, I want you to answer this question more proper. You make a lot of sense in all these dialogues I see. You and your colleagues, and talking about the priorities and where Uganda's competitive advantage is and competitive advantage, the God-given nature, arable land that God has given us. Why is it that nobody is speaking this advice? Why are you so adamant for them to look the other way? What makes you think they just don't listen?
I mean, to an extent they have listened, but I don't think they have done enough. For example, let's say, what should we have done in this country in agriculture? One of the things we should have done is to probably invest very heavily in extension services. But extension services, I mean, we have only half of the extension officers we need in this country. But when it comes to, say, for example, you want to have RDCs, every district will have an RDC. But if you want a district extension service, you want to get an extension service. So for me, I think is the ability to translate what is needed with what you want at the end of the day. Because probably RDCs are very good at campaigning and getting elections and results, and maybe the extension service people cannot be able to do that. But the bottom line for me is is that the priorities of this country we need to focus on this.
Just evening, I had a discussion with the senior presidential advisor, Mr. Moses Biarhanga, and I was asking him, why do you commit yourselves as a country and sign on the Maputo Declaration that says you put 10% of your budget into agriculture and then you put less than 4%? And their argument is that actually they put money in agriculture because they put in roads, they put in water, they put in education, that when you aggregate that, it even goes beyond 10%. Do they make a point there?
I mean, of course, agriculture needs water.
They need roads.
It will need community roads. It will need, it might also need electricity, because if you are to do agro-industrialization, you might also need electricity.
So they have hit their target of the Maputo Declaration.
But the core idea is, what type of roads are you building? Are those roads connecting the markets? Are those roads picking goods from deep in the village and then bringing them to town? Because we can have Entebbe Express Highway, but if you have no road that is connecting to Entebbe Express Highway, then Entebbe Express Highway will only be for the bourgeoisie of this country, just to go to the airport. So you need to ensure that you have those agricultural roads, like how they say you need tourist roads. That's what they talk about. So it's not about that you have an express Entebbe Highway, but if a tourist cannot access the parks deep inside to see the lions and everything else, you have not invested in tourism. You can always say, oh, we have roads, we have Entebbe Express Highway. But the roads that take a tourist from that highway deep inside the jungle, if it's not there, then you will not hit the target. Okay,
I started with asking a general question about why, because in my view, things are no longer adding up. Even when I want to do things right, I feel the pinch, I feel financial squeeze that I've not felt before, and I'm sure everybody is feeling the same, and even some other people could be feeling worse. And you are a member of parliament, you have a constituency, you have people you represent in parliament, Honorable Semuju. I am sure the situation for you, it could even be worse, because sometimes you are called to step in different areas. Again, a general question to you before we go deep into the issue of the budget. What's going on? Why do we find ourselves, you know, so squeezed, like paying through the nose, like they say? The matter of the Benjamins.
Of course, the explanation from the authority is try to attribute the problem to external forces, and then to draw examples from near and far to prove that this is a problem like COVID. So they will tell you in Kenya, in Tanzania, in America, so we are not the only ones who are suffering. Therefore, you brave, the situation will go away. And in towns here, most of the people in urban places in Uganda are not people with structured income. They are people who are hands to mouth. They go and work and eat. The advantage, and finance said so when we were meeting the permanent secretary, is that weather has been good. So in rural areas, people have their own food. But in town, there is no solution. So you'll have to continue suffering. You go at the petrol station, you're not sure. I remember one time when I was meeting Professor Kanyamba, he told me a story about Zimbabwe. Said they went to buy a bottle of beer at, I'm just giving an example, at 6,000 at lunchtime, and in the evening, his time was 2.
Yeah, that's true.
So these days I go to a petrol station, and almost every day the prices are different. But sometimes even the fuel itself is not there. Then they'll tell you, no. And you see, because government used the war in Ukraine to explain away the crisis in Uganda, we don't know when that war will end. So if you tell me things are bad because of the war in Ukraine, and we are not participant in the war, so they don't give an idea as to when...
but that argument, Honorable Semuju, don't you think it holds some water? Because it appears countries in the region, all the economies are hurting. In fact, I'm told in Kenya it could even be worse. I'm told in the United States the inflation is in the 40-year high. In the UK, 30-year high. But even in Rwanda, inflation, I'm told, is about 10%. There is the truth that there's imported inflation. Our economies are inextricably linked. What happens somewhere could affect that. That is also true.
Yeah, but you see, when we had COVID, the reason we closed the airport was because COVID was imported. But we had domestic solution to COVID. The lockdowns that we kept announcing, Uganda, I think, was it UNESCO? In one of those reports, we are the ones who kept students away from school longer than anyone else, because we thought we needed to propose domestic solution to an international problem. So with COVID, we are not listening to America. UK open, even when the figures were still high. So you can't choose what to blame for, because if COVID, you should have said the same thing. You guys live your lives, you have no solution. But you say, no.
So, Honorable Semoju, are you suggesting that other countries in this region are not feeling the pinch?
They do, but
yes.
they are suggesting.
So there is a truth in the argument that there's a global economic crisis that is affecting every country.
Yes, and nobody is disputing that.
Okay.
But each country is making its own proposal. And that's why in Tanzania we've seen government intervening. In Kenya they have done the same. In Rwanda they have done the same. Our economists are saying, no. The better way is to wait it out. One evening we'll wake up when things have normalized. The president said the interventions will interfere with the development agenda of the country, and therefore we must continue with the problem until it settles itself. That's what I read in his speech, and that's what more or less many of his ministers and government people have been saying. So you are in charge of yourself. Even if the problem is global, you must begin proposing. I mean, you had the president, vaccine, we are going to manufacture them. Yeah. We can no longer wait for Europe. We can no longer wait for America. We want this, the same speech is what we want even with this international crisis. We want to hear him say, no, the war in Ukraine doesn't concern us. Maybe you are not, you had forgotten what he said about COVID. He said Africa must find its own solution in Uganda, and he said we are now doing this about factories.
And where is the solution?
The solution exists.
Where was the solution for COVID?
No. At least I was very happy with the restrictions that he imposed, because in Tanzania they didn't impose restrictions. In Uganda I was happy.
And are we any better than Tanzania?
It's very difficult because Tanzania started by declaring numbers, then they stopped. So you wouldn't know how many people died in Tanzania as a result of COVID. But at least in Uganda, we are truthful. People died, we locked the country, and I agreed with the president on the lockdowns each time he announced it. In fact, sometimes he delayed. So you cannot say this is an international problem, and for me, I'm going to propose no domestic solution. Okay. Then you will not be a leader.
Okay. Domestic solution, Mr. Mukunda. You know, if they removed some taxes on some commodities, or maybe did some, subsidies, really. At the end of the day, you understand this more than perhaps we do. Would that be a right judgment? Is that the right call?
I mean, it would bring temporary relief, like probably for a week or two, because the fuel prices are increasing every day, and they are not likely to stop soon, the way they are. So if, for example, you remove 500, maybe the petrol is reduced by 500. But after 2-3 weeks down the road, it will still go back to 500. So if you risk the revenue that you have supposed to.
And the 500 you have removed could also maybe translate to about 200 billion Uganda shillings.
For revenue.
That could also affect another sector.
Yes.
Because, Honorable Semujunganda, do you think the issue of subsidies or removing taxes, some economists think really that it is a waste of time and may not even help you at all?
No, you see, 2020, the opposition looked at the budget and made proposals that would save about 7 trillion shilling. When the president came to speak, he said, the way he speaks, you know him, that people of Saleh have told me in this budget we can actually save 7 trillion. He can't say the opposition said in parliament. Because at that time we looked at, I don't want to call them useless, but they are avoidable. Seminars, special meals, travel, entertainment.
Cutting wastage.
No, I don't want to call it wastage. I call them avoidable expenditure. They have remained in the budget. We passed the budget and we made proposals in parliament. The old items, in fact, what changes in the Ugandan budget are the figures and the dates. But the expenditure remains the same. I think they just go on the list where you have foreign travel, say 10 million, then they say, okay, now 8 or 12. And they give you the same budget, but just with revised figures and dates. The proposal for, because for me I said, if it is true that the bigger problem is caused by the war in Ukraine, and I want to think the war is temporary. In fact, at the beginning, people thought it will not last more than 3 months. Then you suspend. You don't remove completely. You suspend the duration of the war, and then you can reinstate the taxes when the war is over and things have normalized. But two, and that applies even to subsidies, so it can be a temporary intervention until the war is over. Part of the problem is that, and I saw the president this time.
But the war is not in your control. How do you make it temporary when you don't know whether the war is temporary?
You can predict, because you see, Russia that started...
President Putin thought he was going to take Ukraine and even Kiev in 3 days.
Yeah.
And 3 months down the road, but he's still struggling.
Whether he changed or not, but at least now the concentration is in one part of the country. It is no longer the whole country. Part of Ukraine is normalizing. The other day I was reading, they even want to begin exporting either through Romania or through another country. So the wheat that was supposed to be coming from Ukraine may begin flowing. It may not flow in the same amount, but at least it will begin flowing. And I know Russia will also find a solution to begin exporting. So the problem that is as a result of the war, you make temporary intervention because we think this war will end. And then you inform the country that we are making this temporary intervention because we face a problem that we also think it is temporary. As soon as that problem is solved, please be prepared that we are going to reinstate the following taxes, and then you prepare the mind of everybody. But as a government, you cannot say, I will not do anything. But also the budget itself. COVID restricted travel abroad by itself. It's not that we woke up one day and said there will be no travel, but there are no countries to travel to. So that particular item almost disappeared from the budget. It's come back a bit, not as it was. In many government institutions, they did not budget for travel abroad. Our own proposal in Parliament as opposition was that do away with the seminars.
Even medical tourism, in a way, was halted.
Yeah, people, they couldn't, yeah. So we said, even if you're not removing money from that item completely, at least reduce it. You can't have money for seminars and entertainment and this and that. And that money that you're going to save as a result of suppressing this particular item is what you need to play with in subsidies and in also suspension of some taxes.
Okay.
As soon as things normalize, you can return them. But for me, I actually think some of the items need to go away from our budget completely.
All right. Mr. Mukunda, if you can maybe take us through, because I'm sure you know these numbers more. How much we're going to spend on our recurrent expenditure? How much are we going to spend on debt servicing? How much are we going to spend on some of those areas? And maybe what you would have thought the priorities are.
I just want, there's something which Honor has said. I think the budget, the way it is, because to say that we should not do anything and we work up things will go away, I think probably that's that could be a problem, because the population also need leadership on that. to let them know that you are doing something to help them and cushion them. And as such is that the way government is saying we should tighten our belts, we should not see the same way government tightening its belt but not loosening it. So that the monies, we can save monies and begin properly to see where should we put it to cushion the people. Because one thing is for sure, is that we should not have shortage, and especially shortage for food. We shouldn't have that, because if we have that, that breeds chaos. Because right now we are all a bit moving on and survive simply because we have food in our homes. So I think that is very critical where we are in this crisis. When you say, please, we want to see also the other side of government also question. So I would have loved to hear banning of travel, for example. I would have to hear that seminars have also been cut. I would like to hear this medical tourism, so many things. That gives confidence that something is going to happen in terms of helping ordinary people. In terms of the budget, the budget, of course, we still have more money on recurrent and less on expenses. And I think we have 15 trillion on recurrent and 14 on development. Simply because the cost of running government has become too expensive. We have like another 5 trillion on financing local governments. So for me, where I stand is that when I look at the district and look at the budget for the district, and then you find that almost the 70% of the money we give a district is only for wage and non-wage. It gives you a picture that there is less service that is directly benefiting the people, because a huge chunk of money remains at the district headquarters. So
for a situation like that, what would you do? How would you do it differently? Because you've given us about 16 or 18 trillion for recurrent expenditure for consumption, and maybe 14 for development. I mean, we're not moving moving forward at all, are we?
And that's why I think that's where now we need to come in and say, the question of rationalization, for example. And I used to give an example. You have Education Service Commission, you have Health Service Commission, you have Public Service Commission. All these three bodies are recruiting public servants. So they have their own boards, they rent differently, they have their own staff. That is an expense that could be combined into one. And you have a service commission that recruits public servants for everybody. So these small agencies of government consume a lot of money. And that's why they are saying if rationalization could be the speed at which rationalization will be increased, I think we're likely to be saving almost like $1 trillion out of that alone.
So the agentification of government, Honorable Samuju Nganda, was supposed to stop with the mergers. There was a talk about the mergers, and then somebody even went and did the computation and how much we could save, but the merger has not happened. What do you think was the problem?
They are going to be hesitant because there are also interests there. I chaired the committee on COSASE 2014-2016, and in my second report I asked whether it was necessary for government to disband, the term they used when they were disbanding UEB. You create a electricity generation company, but that electricity generation company also hires ESCOM. They sit in office, just supervise someone else. You create a distribution company which also hires Omeme. And so we asked in that report, then why did we have these agencies? Because one company can hire ESCOM, can hire Omeme. Yeah. So
there's transmission also.
And the cost, there is also transmission. The cost is factored into the tariff, because you are also financing the existing of these structures. At the end of the day, you have the electricity regulatory authority, you have transmission, you have distribution, you have generation. So you recruit people, pay for expenses, they buy vehicles, they do this and that for a service that they have hired out. They don't do it themselves. We did that in a report. Eventually, government said that they are now going to, and for me, that is just an illustration. I have been quarreling with colleagues who are cabinet ministers because the bad manners I saw in Nigeria and a little bit of Kenya are also here. A minister that cannot be identified by two people on the street, he also has 3 vehicles that he thinks he needs security, and it's not security. These days they have UPDF. It's a show off. And I said, you see, once...
They don't only have 3 vehicles,
yes.
but if 3 vehicles on top of that is even discipline on the road.
Yeah.
Pushing the rest, other road users on the side.
I said it's going to be very difficult.
On the wrong lane.
When Ahmadinejad was president of Iran, he said, first of all, I get a salary, so the office must not give me food. Wow. He said, I'm not going to use a jet. He was flying commercial. He goes to UN in Emirates. Said, this business of red carpet, I want to come and work, not for people to begin lining up to receive me. So all of you, why don't you go and work, that you are here to receive a head of state? And until terrorism, I saw in Sweden, Denmark, a prime minister riding a bicycle to go to office. In fact, the next time I visited Sweden, they had put some barricades because of, but his office was accessible, like a secondary school where you go and meet a head teacher. The president of Uganda, when I had a chance to speak to him on a talk show, and I asked him about his convoy, and it's not one convoy that you see, that fleet time was 13. About the expenditure in Parliament, when we presented the minority report, that was one of the issues that were raised. You can't have a residence, because now a requirement that each government department or ministry will submit a budget policy, but also list a number of vehicles that they have, list staff. State House, the last time I looked at their policy statement, the president was employing 1,600. Those are the employees in the State House. Around the kitchen is rushing this under the State House. And you can see, because these things are not a secret, they list all of them. Presidential advisors now under State House, because you have presidential advisors, Office of the President, presidential advisors under State House. Officially, because some of them are not declared, but at least officially, the ones that are in the book, you now have 139 presidential advisors under State House. As a result, the president has asked for a budget of 8 billion shilling to rent them offices, just the rent alone, not any other. So these expenditures are avoidable. This money you can invest into sectors that are generating money, employ more people. But I think the president, and I told him, my view of him is that he is someone who is more interested in keeping power and make every people access pay, because they are very important, not in production, but at least in helping him keep power and continue popularizing himself. And that will be a decision that will have to be taken at one time. Because when we looked at this whole budget, this budget, 15 trillion, 16, eventually it was moving into 19, is going to be debt management. They call it debt management, treasury operations. We interest now on money borrowed from commercial banks is going to 6 trillion, because you have to borrow and rent for presidential advisors, borrow and give them vehicles. And I mean, the way the debt is managed is that you pick one debt and pay the old debt. So in the budget you have 16.1 trillion shilling debt management.
Hold on to your point there, Honorable Samujo and Mr. Julius Mukonda, because we're going to take a break. When we come back, let's look into our debt issue and what does it really mean when we talk about debt management or debt servicing. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On The Spot. My name is Patrick Amar. My guest tonight are Mr. Julius Mukunda from CS-BAG and Honorable Samuju Ibrahim Nganda, Member of Parliament representing Kira Municipality. But I think I now need to bring you the latest news coming in from Omoro County in the Omoro by-election. And what we're getting here is that Ojok Andrew Olanya of the NRM has won that by-election with a landslide of 14,224 votes. And the person who came close is Simon Akecha Tolit of Nup with 1,633. You can imagine, from 14,000, the following person is 1,633. And that one is followed by Odong Justin of FDC with 539 votes, followed by Terence, an independent, with 532 votes. We have Kiza Oscar of Anti with 63 votes. We have Jimmy Walter Onen with 68 votes. And I think this was such a big win for Andrew Ojok Olanya, winning the seat that was previously held by his father, the late Jacob Olanya. So that's what is coming out from Omoro County, that Andrew is now the MP-elect for Omoro County. Maybe I digressed a bit, but I thought the people should get to know what is going on there. What a landslide. You know, 14,000, somebody who's following him has 1,000 votes. And there are about 6 people on the ballot. It was a massacre of sorts.
Yeah.
What happened?
We'll study the circumstances.
There's nothing to study with this one.
There is something. We will study at least.
The beating was decisive, but I can understand also there is also the sympathy vote. There's also a lot of the NRM bigwigs that have pitched camping in northern Uganda. I can understand that. Well, he's also a man of substance, he's a young man, so that win was decisive. All right, let's move on. The issue of debt servicing, the repayment, you know, I think perhaps, is it number 1 or number 2? The biggest chunk of the budget, where is it going?
I mean, the debt is, they can't even appropriate it. Actually, when they say 48 trillion Ugandan shillings, parliamentarians can only talk about 30.
So the other 18
is already gone.
It's already gone.
It's already gone.
But when
it takes to the first column, the budget.
So the biggest chunk of our budget is actually going into debt servicing. But when you talk about debt servicing, what do we mean exactly?
I mean, debt. I mean, it's. Are
we paying back the loan?
It's amount. No, it's amount of the loans we are paying back, plus the interest. What he was telling you about. But there is what we call debt refinancing.
Okay.
Debt refinancing is when, basically, is that you're supposed to have paid this year, but you are unable to pay. So you come back to me and say, you know what, let me pay next financial year. And we agree on the new terms now. So we carry forward that loan. Because the loan now is good, you are supposed to show that loan in your books. So it must be part of the budget that you are likely to pay this money in the next financial year. And that is not good.
Let me understand this, and perhaps the viewers want to understand. When we talk about 18 trillion now for debt, is the government of Uganda in this budget going to pay 18 trillion?
No, see, what is going to happen?
Yeah, what is going to happen?
We pay principal and pay interest.
Okay.
We borrow money from commercial banks through what they call treasury memorandum and treasury bills. This financial year, in the budget that we have passed, we will pay principal of, I think, 8 trillion, and then pay interest of close to 6 trillion. But we will also, because you see, the way government has been, and that's why they call it debt management, is to pick one loan and pay the whole loan. So I owe you money, you go to him to borrow and pay me. Next year, you go to another person to pay him. So that's what finance has been doing. So the 16 trillion has money for the commercial banks here, but there is also money that we have borrowed from outside the country. We will be paying 2.1 trillion, I think, interest on money borrowed from outside, because you know one of our lenders now is China, and China money is not concession. They're also like a commercial bank almost. So interest on foreign debt is 2.1, and then there is also principal. So when you add all that, you have 16 trillion, but they wanted to revise it to 19. Because the reason it goes to 19 is that they will need to pick. So
in other words, when we're here, you know, sometimes feeling very proud and boasting, we have a 49 or 48 trillion budget. Really, that's not more the case. We have a 29 trillion budget.
It's
or 30.
You see, the budget, and we've said this many times, when you take away the 16 or 19 trillion for, call it debt management, and then you go to salaries and the newspapers and the fuel and the vehicles. This year, what the economists call discretionary, that money government can deploy, is, as he said, just about 14 trillion. So the rest of the money is committed, because my salary in Parliament...
Because even the salaries, by the way.
Yeah, my salary in Parliament will come, and you cannot use my salary to do a road. So the money, the 16 trillion for managing a debt, and another big chunk is for salaries and other things, as listed there, vehicles. So what remains for government to spend really is about 14 trillion. So that's your budget.
So, okay, Mr. Mukunda, after we have borrowed that money, how are we using this money? Because it appears also we borrow the money. Sometimes money is not deployed to do what is expected to do, and it sits on the account for another 1 or 2 years, and yet, like Honorable Samuju is saying, you have to pay interest, paying on interest on a money sometimes which is not even working.
I mean, that's what has been, and I think that's some of the reforms the government in Israel to speed up and do the public investment management. Because the Auditor General report is telling us that only 40% of the public projects are on time. Then it will tell you that the rest are not. And of course, I'm going to blame COVID for, you know, for everything. But yet from the beginning, you can realize that we are not ready to implement a project.
Only 40%? That money is on time. So the other 60%, you are paying interest when the money is not even being used.
You pay interest when the money is not. I mean, that's how it is. You sign on a contract, for them they begin calculating the interest immediately. And if you have not used the money, you still pay. That's why he's saying you have to put money in the budget to pay for a loan that you have not used. That you have not used. As of December 2021, our debt portfolio was 73 trillion Ugandan shillings. But I think for me, with debt would not be a problem. But definitely the way we are going to use debt. If, for example, is that we borrow and then we construct that Busega, the northern bypass, which is supposed to be in 5 years to have finished it, and you take 20 years to finish, then of course the benefits, you are getting benefits after 15 years. Then different, that already is also.
In fact, the road has been overtaken by vents. It was supposed to be on the periphery of the city, but now it is within the city.
So if you talk about Mpiji Busega Highway, for example, to have finished 5 years ago.
They're just beginning.
But not even the government has gone on that project. Forget about roads.
Busega Kibuye, I think I've also borrowed for Busega Kibuye.
Yes. So for me, it is very important. It is very important that before even the parliament says get this loan out, that the government comes and says, you know what, we are ready to start it. How are you ready to start a project? that before you start a project, make sure that you have right of way. That is a very simple thing.
Honorable Semuju Nganda, your job really is appropriation, and we have to look to you as Parliament. Really, why do you accept government to borrow when they are not ready? Money is sitting on account, we are paying the interest, and then they will come back another day, borrow, and yet they are not even using the money. The general report is there.
We've quarreled with them because it's a requirement under the law that every budget is accompanied by a report on public debt. And finance is very good at providing information. And they will give you, they will update you on each and every loan required and applied and given and so on and so forth. There was time, remember, when the president himself said, no borrowing anymore, and then he gave specific loans. But thereafter, what did they do? Because there is the domestic borrowing, which is taking a toll on earth because of money and so on and so forth. But there's also the external borrowing. Parliament, you are almost blackmailed. They will come and tell you you're going to do a road to ease transport here and there. So what do? And you will actually think that they are going to do the road. And then you are told later that counter funding was not available. That's why it has delayed. So it's not simple. You need an efficient government. This government, of course, certainly is not efficient and it cannot be. But also you need a honest government. One time we had a big quarrel with the finance because people are choosing finance that when they hear that this money is available, IMF and World Bank, they will go and get the money and then begin thinking of designing roads. And in this budget, the one we have passed has 139 billion, which is commitment fees, not even interest.
Commitment.
Money that will
Please explain this commitment fee.
When you go and apply for a loan, and your application is processed and goes through, you're going to pay commitment even before you use the money. So you continue paying, even if you don't, most of the lenders, especially international, will not begin charging interest because interest can be charged after 20 years. But you're going to pay commitment fee that you will actually take the money. So you begin paying. So when you don't take the money, it means you borrowed the money, it sits on account, but you continue paying that fee. You will not be paying principal because the money is not yet with you. You will also not be paying interest. But there is also management fee. So really, borrowing is okay, all the countries do it, but you must use the money for the purpose for which, and you must be ready to use it. As he said, if you're going to do a road, because most of the road projects will use our local resources to pay for the
right of way.
for the right of way.
Settlement.
Sometimes you go and borrow money for construction when we have not paid people to live. Sometimes, by the way, we even contract companies to construct when we are not ready, and they begin charging interest. I've forgotten.
No, the flyover is 300 million per day.
There is another one where we're supposed to be paying like 500
per day.
and but these guys are competent, they are qualified. When you go in a room with them to argue, they are going to out-argue because they are more qualified than you. Later you have reports and then ask them, but you came and made these arguments. So all these problems, I remember Ruboa, we were in Parliament and we said this is not possible because that project was supposed to be 48 months. 48 months. And the idea was that the investor, we will guarantee he goes to borrow money, she goes to borrow money, she constructs, and then we begin paying every year for the next 8 years, and the hospital becomes ours. In fact, for Ruboa, we have paid 349 billion already. In this budget, she was coming for 319 billion. And the people who did all the work are lawyers, because every government contract is supposed to be sanctioned by the Solicitor General. They are lawyers, qualified. You have finance. They are the ones who signed the contract. So I don't know. For me, the problem, I think, is the supervision. People have taken advantage, and some of these contracts, the president accused the Binais of turning State House into a clearing house. Sometimes some of these projects and some of these are imposed on, even on technical people. By the time you go, the president has already committed the country that this lady is going to do us a hospital. She's very good, so you go and sign the contract and she begins. When she's not ready, you can't do.
So in other words,
not done.
Semuju,
Yes.
in other words, as Parliament, you can even appropriate money to some sectors, but when it comes to actual spending, you are, as Parliament, you are ignored.
We are ignored, but also
where you think money is going to money can be deployed anyway, but you can sit the almost 600 of you and determine money is going to go like that, but at the end of the day, they don't follow you.
Yeah, and the nature of our work is not, because you see, Parliament will appropriate money, and then under normal circumstances, you're supposed to wait for the Auditor General, who does a report and submits Parliament every January. In fact, I've had problems with MPs who attempt to become accountants. We are not. You have to wait for the Auditor General to report on the expenditure. And that's when you begin now looking at the figures, whether they add up. Some Auditor General also does a value for money audits. So you will take a decision. They will bring you a budget and say, to finance this budget, we need to borrow the following. And then they will put it on a request for you to approve, because the law, the constitution says you must approve. And then you approve, thinking that they have gone to work. When the Auditor General does a report and brings it to you, and he has the figures, like he has given the figures to you, 40% of government projects are completed on time. All the others have delayed, and each delay attracts a penalty, either from a contractor or from the lenders. So until we have improved the supervision and efficiency of government, it's going to be very difficult. The public debt will continue going up, but also until we've decided to cut down on all the avoidable, I don't want to call them wastage, people keep calling, but on all the avoidable.
So you as Parliament, what can you do to ensure that at least the money that is there is deployed in sectors that can maybe help the economy, so that your role of appropriation is actually done, respected, and because it is one of the cardinal functions of the
unfortunately, and I want to admit, because the majority of the MPs are from the ruling party. I sit on the budget committee. The areas where they will tell you, oh, that one, don't bother. I remember, and that's why we had to do a minority report, because each sector, from education to health, there are items that are not items for which money has not been provided in the budget. Some of them very critical. They tell you regional referral hospitals don't have functioning x-rays, they don't have scanners, and for you think this matter is urgent, and finance makes no provision. So when we start, because the law allows us a particular percentage of reallocation, and I say, no, why don't we start with the classified expenditure? Because my argument was, even equipment, and I said you can look at Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting a war, but all the guns that are going to Ukraine are declared before they go. And America said, we're going to give you Stinger, we're going to give you this, and they are on the way. I said, so what is classified about Uganda's ammunition that you must come and ask for 4 trillion shilling classified procurement?
Even the prisoners are classified, by the way.
No, yeah, even even the prison maybe, but even the residency of the president has classified. State House has classified. So I said, oh, thank God there is money here. So we pick, oh, that one don't touch. So at the end of the day, every item you attempt to touch, they are telling you, and the NRM MPs have been properly spoken to. So you almost remain with nothing to reallocate. Partly we are to blame as Parliament. I want to admit that we didn't do enough. I think there is more money that we should have made available to agriculture, to education, and those are the arguments in our minority report. Find money from here, from State House, and I asked, yeah, do you need to rent an office for full figure that is going to advise the president, Butcherman? 8 billion shilling that you are renting offices for those fellows to advise your president. I mean, It's crazy.
Mr. Mukunda, I have seen you again and again in these budgetary meetings. You work a lot as CS bag. And I'm wondering, do you sometimes get a sense of frustration that you're saying the same things? What has been the impact of civil society organizations like you? Actually even other Ugandans, because they were invited in to listen to this budget proposition and all that. What has been the impact?
No, I think probably the impact would be felt by our absence at the end of the day. But I think it's very critical and important that we keep on highlighting these things. I think it's very, very, very important. Because, for example, like on debt, I mean, debt it's ballooning. So far, I'm happy to see that now Minister of Finance is coming up and saying, no. There's some of these projects need to get out of the system. You know, there's some sense of let's really get our house to order. I think that's a number which is very
because we are now choking with that.
Yes, because which is very critical. But also, I think the whole conversation around government trying to do program-based budgeting, which I think is very critical and also very important, because a child that doesn't just go to school and you say I've just sent a child, she needs to be immunized. So if health is not interested in ensuring that kids are immunized, maybe the education outcomes are not going to come out. If what is not provided in these schools, so probably ensuring that there is some sort of coordination. Yes, more work needs to be done, but at least the conversation around to ensure that there is that coordination of delivering services. It's still very critical. But Kamara, there is a point on that I think which is absorption capacity. Absorption capacity, you know, that even when we give you money,
I don't have no capacity to use it.
you have no capacity to use it. You return it back. You return it back to the treasury. And of course, there has been the whole point of, oh, you send money very late at the end of the quarter, and then the financial money comes back.
The procurement requirements and all
but
that.
Even there are those where the money is there, and then the accounting officer brings it back. And as long as we don't reform that, we shall continue losing out in terms of service delivery. Because if, for example, an accounting officer really, for the last 5 years, you keep on bringing back the money. Why should we make you an accounting officer the next time around?
So this absorption capacity,
that's something that
we are borrowing, but we have no capacity to absorb that money.
You borrow money and
shameful.
And you know
it is planning, because you see, there was time when we were quarreling with the government. They had borrowed money to do a road. When the loan was processed, then they started designing.
Yeah, those are the
visibility study, designing,
the oil roads.
And then, but the money was there, borrowed and approved.
We're paying the interest.
We were paying the interest. We paid the commitment fee. Then they begin designing. Then they begin, because you see, for government to contract a road, the major ones can take even 2 years, the process. Yeah. You've seen the expressway, the Southern Bypass and Ginger. I think now they are in court, they are in arbitration, they are in what? So government can take 2 years to contract a road because of the process that is involved. So which means first deal with the first things.
Fast.
There are government projects where they have paid people to live and construction doesn't start. 6 years later, people have returned and they can't chase them, then what do we do? So that's where we are as a country. Part of it is inefficiency, but part of it are people who just hear their loans here and then they go to apply for them. It happens. I remember when we joined Parliament, there will be people who will be throwing money in your face. Please don't be tempted. Because there was, it must have been either the 9th Parliament when MPs borrowed heavily.
Yeah,
Honorable Samuju, Mr. Mukunda, hold on to your points, gentlemen, because we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'll open the lines. You're going to see the numbers on the screen. Please call us and tell us what you think and how you're going through these times when everybody is being told to tighten the belt. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guest tonight are Honorable Ibrahim Semoju Nganda, Member of Parliament representing Kira Municipality, and Mr. Julius Mukunda from CS Bag. This is a time when you get to have your say. You will see the numbers on the screen. Pick your phone and tell us what you think, how you're going through these times when we are all feeling this financial squeeze. So you tell us your name and where you're from, and if you have a question for any of the guests here, please do ask the question. And maybe if you're hurting, we can understand, but please debate with respect, even if you are disagreeing. So, well, probably what is good for us as a country is Uganda. What is unique is that we are able to have food. And if we didn't have food, then we would be in much bigger trouble.
So for me, really, I complain about agriculture because why should we complain that we don't have wheat? Is it because we don't have land? Is it because our soils are so bad? Or it's just because we lack leadership in that particular area of agriculture? We are complaining about palm oil. Why up to this time, why can't we envisage that palm oil, we use it so much that therefore we need to grow it because already there is an internal market? Why is it that NARO, the National Agricultural Research Organization, cannot be able to give us the right varieties for our own environment? God gave us this country, very rich in soils, very fertile. I mean, why couldn't we do that? Maybe for oil, we can say, okay, oil is something that it's outside our means, but surely for the rest of the things, we would have managed to produce them here internally in this particular, in our country. So I think for me, there is a need to look at agricultural leadership in this country to see where it is taking us. Because sugar, I mean, we have enough sugar in this country that we are producing. All these other crops, Kamara, we could grow them here in this country.
Okay, let me just pick one caller online who has been waiting here. I have a call online. Hello. Hello. Okay, as we try to reconnect with that caller, the issue of sugar, I don't understand it, Honorable Ibrahim, because look, we have enough sugar here, but okay, and I understand we have some caller. Have a call online. Hello.
Yes, Patrick.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening to you, sir.
Let me ask my producer to just turn up that volume here so that my guests can be able to hear you. Your name again?
Right. I'm called Geoffrey.
Yes, Joshua.
Geoffrey.
Geoffrey, yes, okay.
Yes, I'm calling from Masindi.
Geoffrey in Masindi, you are loud and clear. Please go right ahead.
Thank you very much. I want to congratulate our guests for tonight for the views that they're giving us. Mm-hmm. But my worry is, to those MPs, the truth is we know things have gone high, mm-hmm. but I don't see them talking for the lower person. The salary has not been increased, mm-hmm. but the prices of almost everything has gone high. I don't hear them talking in Parliament, raising those complaints of the lower person down here. What else do they want us to do? Mm-hmm. President, he has talked his, that's what we expect from him. Nothing much beyond that. But our MP that we elected them, we have great hope in them that they can talk on behalf of us because we cannot reach there. Mm-hmm. They are the one to talk for us, but we don't hear them talking about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Our caller from Masindi there, and you know, is actually letting out a cry that you think about them too. You know, yes, you are our leaders. Let me pick another caller online. Hello. Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Yes. Good evening. This is Andrew from Kisugu.
Andrew from Kisugu. Kisubi.
Kisugu.
Okay, Kisubi, go right ahead.
Yes. Now, Patrick, I'm getting more concerned. A week ago, the Parliament passed on the budget. Mm-hmm. But I'm scared the MPs are not putting the Minister of Finance into task mm-hmm. to explain to the House what are the marketing, the budgeting tools he is coming up with those budgets. So we have a big scale also in that House, because I'm looking at the MPs who are not bothered on questioning the Minister of Finance why he has come up with a budget. Because at the end of the day, the budget is what determines our cost of living. So maybe Honorable Semuju, my role model, can always try to task the Minister of Finance to give us why some of those tools have been come up with, because they are squeezing the local person seriously.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe you can just respond to those two. The gentleman in Masindi feels you need to fight for the Muntwawansi.
I think the complaint, if I heard him correctly, he was complaining in general but also in specific terms that he doesn't hear his MPs. And I can't answer for them. So his MPs should be able to explain to him if he doesn't hear them. The limitation with the parliament is that the law on appropriation also has the limits. You cannot rewrite the budget. Because this is a budget submitted to you for approval. In fact, the president has been calling with parliament. He says you can only make a recommendation, don't change anything. Approval doesn't mean that you write for me a budget. But parliament does try sometimes. I think we need to try harder than what we are doing. But sometimes the NRM MPs mainly, there are areas that they will not touch. The presidency, security, they are going to throw security in your face. Because I've told you when we went for it to consider the budget, they said we've looked around here, there is no way we can get money from. And I said, no, we start with classified expenditure. Because defense alone was asking 3 trillion, and finance was telling them, no, we have 1.9. And that money, you don't know what it does. They use security to blackmail you, and then they will put in money, which will end up, by the way, doing campaigns. The second person from Chisugu, his complaint now are the same that we keep meeting. Even if you bring finance and you roll them in the mud, they will, because at the very beginning of a budget process, they will project how much money is going to be available and then divide that money. But the template is there. And finance cannot tell me they are the ones who draw that template. It is done somewhere else. It is done somewhere else. But this time around, by the way, we said even the money for debt management is also too much. In fact, when Parliament was doing some reallocation, it is that money that it encroached on. Because we asked finance for a justification on the interest. Because we said, no. It appears you just woke up and increased the interest. Because we didn't see the debt corresponding to the interest. And they said, no, we can remove some money and go and put in other areas. But the law does not allow you a free hand to go and change everything in the budget, because you will be writing a budget. They say this is our budget that we brought to you for approval, so your power is limited. And the president said, do not touch anything. The budget, you can only recommend to me that change here, but you can't be the one changing.
Okay, gentlemen, our time is almost up. Let me ask you, Mr. Julius Makunda, for your parting shot.
I think is for me 2 things. One is, I would really want to see all of us tightening our belts. Tightening our belts is not for one class of people, and then another one they are loosening their belts. I want us to
Operation Muogo.
Yes, that Operation Muogo is for all of us. That's number one. Number 2 for me is Ugandans. However the budget is, the small and the big it is, please be interested in it. Go to that health center, go to that school, and see whether the teacher has arrived, and see whether the in charge has arrived, if they are there. For it, because their budget is usually on the notes board, and see whether they're actually using that particular money. Because the more we just leave with them and say that these things are for government, the more we as ordinary people continue to lose out.
All right.
And really, that's my parting shot. Thank you.
Honorable Semuju.
Let me end by advising government not to be angry with those who are demanding that something must be done. Because I think that anger was the reason they asked Dr. Kizza Besigye to pay 30 million shilling for offences for which we've been paying 200,000 before. Please, you must do something. If you don't do it, the population will remain unsettled. And don't visit that failure and anger on the population.
Honorable Samuju Nganda, Ibrahim, Mr. Julius Mukunda, I want to thank you so much for your time, but most of all, I want to appreciate your insights on this issue of the economy and the budget process. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you
And
so
I also
much.
want to thank you for your great company. Good night and God bless Uganda.